All right, good afternoon, everybody. I would like to call to order the April 11th, 2023 meeting of the City of Charleston Traffic and Transportation Committee. Thank everybody for being here and begin, if you all don't mind, with a moment of silence, please. Thank you. Okay, first order of business is approval of minutes from March 14th, 2023. Do I have a motion? That I can't make. Got a motion, Mayor? Second, any discussion, additions, deletions, corrections? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Before we get into the meat of our agenda, just for those of you who are visiting us today, this is the Traffic and Transportation Committee. We're a committee of 5 members, of which only 3 are here today. One is on his way. Councilmember Brady will be here. Councilmember Gregg will not be here. Councilmember Shade to my left here is visiting us from City Council, and we're happy to have him. We're going to have a couple of things on our agenda, one of which is going to take up the bulk of our agenda today. And just a couple of things. I went back and looked. I haven't done this, I think, since I got elected mayor. I looked at the city code as it relates to traffic and transportation and committees in general. And one of the things I was reminded about is one of the things that we do with committees here at the city is we're sort of a intake valve for the city council to then report back to them. And actually, it's across the board. It's the duty of the standing committees of the council to carefully examine into and report upon all petitions and other matters referred to them by this body using due diligence thereon. So today we're going to do some diligence.
Okay.
And I'm looking forward to that. So the next item on our agenda is Union Pier Traffic Plan presentation, improvement project presentation. There's a number of people here from the port and their team. I'm not going to go and recognize each one. I think someone is probably going to take the mic and do that for me. So unless there's anything from members of the committee before we get started on this item on our agenda, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Ms. Yarborough and her team, and the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I will take a brief moment to introduce my colleagues. You're going to hear from Jacob Lindsay and Jennifer Beal, but Barbara Melvin, our CEO, is here, as well as our counsel, Brian Hellman and Joe Owens. We also have our CFO, Phil Pageant, sitting across the way, and our manager of social media, Janie Treywick, is here as well.
Great. Well, thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Mayor, members of the committee, city staff, and members of the community for turning out this afternoon. We appreciate the opportunity to present an important aspect of the Union Pier redevelopment project, the infrastructure improvements associated with our proposal. Jordy Yarborough, as you said, Mr. Chairman, Vice President of Statewide Stakeholders and Local Government Relations for the South Carolina Ports. Over the last year, we've engaged extensively with the community to gather input and ideas on the plan to transform Union Pier into a new mixed-use neighborhood with significant public assets. The proposal includes creating more green space and public parks, expanding access to the waterfront, enhancing flooding solutions, and improving connectivity in our downtown. The proposal is making its way through the city's rigorous public process. We continue to meet with you all, city officials, also stakeholders and residents, community members every week. We have been listening and we are still listening, and we're responding to the community feedback. People are sharing their support and excitement for the project, as well as voicing concerns about certain aspects, including traffic. Tonight, we're here to talk about the infrastructure improvements that will be necessary to support the new and surrounding neighborhoods and how this proposal improves the city grid. The proposal calls for extending existing streets, making enhancements to our city more walkable, bikeable, and drivable. As most of you know, Jacob Lindsay is running point on this project. He and others at the LOW team have assembled a best-in-class team of engineers and designers. And so Jennifer Beal is our lead traffic engineer. She's worked closely with the team at Thomas and Hutton to develop the presentation that she and Jacob are here to present to you tonight. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jacob. And again, thank you for having us.
Yes, sir, Mr. Lindsay.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Mayor, members of the committee, council member. It's been a while.
Yeah, welcome back.
So I am going to, as Jordy mentioned, walk you through the overview of our approach to transportation at Union Pier. And to do that, I'm going to need a clicker.
And I think that we can provide that for you. Do we have a, there it is.
Very good. So before we begin, I want to just be sure that we are all on the same page with where this master plan stands today. By the way, is this microphone recording or am I just speaking into the
No, it's recording.
space?
It's recording.
Okay, thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Yeah, you can raise it up a little bit.
Like this. Okay, there we go. I'm gonna do my best to get closer to this microphone. And eat the mic. That's right. That's what you always say, Mayor. Okay, so as soon as we go full screen on this, I'll go ahead and begin.
There
Now,
you go.
you're going to hear from Jennifer and from myself, obviously this evening, afternoon. And at any given time, if there are questions, please feel free to jump in. So first and foremost, as I was saying, to remind everyone where we are with the overall master plan at Union Pier. And if I could just get a cursor to click on that slide so I can control it, I think that will be good to go. Just one click. Here we go. Okay. You all know the site today. I assume that everyone in this room knows where Union Pier is. I think we're through that phase of the project, so we can go to the next one. So the site today and the current master plan proposal. This is what we will be submitting to the technical review committee soon. This is the aerial rendering of what is proposed. And another view from the north shows the existing site and what is currently proposed. And the key thing that I want to point out, again, just as a refresher for those who may not have seen it, is that we have met with the community. We continue to meet with interest groups. We continue to listen. And we have made a major change in the overall master plan, which eliminates development, eliminates buildings in the corridor where the rice mill is and replaces it with park space. There is now a grand mall that connects the rice mill to the waterfront, which you can see coming all the way through the site, connecting to the island park. So just to refresh everyone's memory, this is our current operating master plan. This is the one that we will be submitting to the technical review committee for consideration soon. And in regards to this presentation, these are the four things that we'll be talking about. First and foremost, the planning process, how we have arrived at the current ideas, the intent of the transportation design, the program and its effects, the program meaning all the things that are proposed to be built at Union Pier and what they do. And then fourth, a review of all the opportunities that are unlocked through this redevelopment. So with that said, jump right in. And first is the planning process. If you've been to any of our events, which I know that all of you have in some capacity, you've seen this set of slides before. These are the principles that we derived with the community in our initial outreach and engagement. The very top one, of course, is about connections. And that's really what we're here to discuss today. About the potential for Union Pier to improve mobility on the peninsula, that people traveling on foot, on bike, transit, and in cars will experience improved streets, intersections, and views to the water. That has been one of our goals from day one, continues to remain one of our goals, along with all the other things which we're not going to dig into. This is the current proposed master plan from the air. So this again is the same thing that you saw in the earlier watercolor, and you can notice the large green space in the middle around the rice mill, which is the most recent change. And I think everyone's got this, but as you know, in this course of this presentation, some slides will be horizontal, some will be vertical. You can always use the Harris Teeter to orient yourself, or the Fleet Landing restaurant, or of course the Wharfside to the north. In this master plan, what you see is a grid of streets. You see new development opportunities. You see the new waterfront rebuilt. And I want to point out a key point as we begin. Inherent in the discussion of converting Union Pier from a port into something else is the idea that there must be agreement, concurrence around the goals of this conversion, changing Union Pier into something else. And that means agreement among many, many bodies, many stakeholders, and many agencies, including the future owner, the current owner, the local government, state government, and many others. The rail that operates here, other adjacent property owners, coastal permitting agencies. This is a major project with many implications, and that interagency coordination is so important here. In this map, you see the ownership of different streets in and around Union Pier. Obviously, they're different colors. The state owns many of the roadways, and then the city owns many of the roadways as well. It's a fragmented ownership around the site. And our request, what's going to be, and has been written to the PUD and will be continued to be written into the PUD, is a request for city ownership of all the streets on Union Pier. We believe that the city is the best owner, and we, of course, will provide a revenue stream to maintain those streets. So I want to begin with that request. We do want to move the ownership of these streets out of the state and into the city so that we can design them the way that they should be designed. So that's the planning process that we've gone through, and that's the ownership scenario in terms of streets, city ownership, and public spaces too, by the way, which I didn't mention. Now we'll talk about the intent of the transportation design. What do we intend to do? And I'm going to just grab my phone so I can watch our time.
I'm watching. I got it.
And Mr. Chair, if you could just advise me about what time we should wrap. We're at 3:18 now.
You're 40 minutes and you're 5 in.
Okay, perfect. This is Concord Street today. This is not far from where the site begins on the southern end. And this is looking north. You can see Dockside to the north, as well as the Gadsden condos to the north. There's also some other features that I want to point out. Sunny day flooding, which is here, or maybe this is just ponding left over, as well as a tour bus, which is there. And this, I think, illustrates a key point that when we talk about traffic and the traffic that will be generated by the future uses, we are not starting at zero. The baseline is not zero. Union Pier today does generate traffic. There are 3,000 cars that move on and off of it twice a week. There are idling tour buses and buses that come and go on the streets. There are, of course, industrial operations ongoing. So you do have trucks and rail that are moving industrial products in and out of the warehouses today. So our baseline is not zero. It's not an unoccupied site. We do have traffic and transportation impacts that are occurring today. And in the future, there will be a different scenario here, but you do have traffic that's generated through the site. Now, to go zoom back out, and that image before is taken from, you know where the photo is from. The challenge is that Union Pier is a barrier today. It disconnects the network. It stands between the northern and southern ends of the peninsula. So the potential for connections is not yet realized. There was a time when Concord Street did go through the site in the 1990s. And I think if I recall correctly, it was bifurcated in 1994 or thereabouts, and it became one continuous property. It's also worth mentioning that present day Washington Street in its snaky configuration as it moves south and becomes Pritchard and then turns again and becomes Concord, much of that roadway is actually on port property. There is not a right of way there. So the port will be in effect giving up property to create the new roadways. Much of today's Washington Street Vine Harris Teeter is actually moving over port property. The nature of those agreements, I have not seen. There is obviously some agreement in place to provide for right-of-way functionality, but it is on port land. So the port will be in effect giving up property to create these new rights of way. And again, speaking to the importance of that interagency coordination as we move forward on the design of a transportation network here. And also to the team, I'm not looking back at you, but if there's anything that you want me to say or anything that I forget, you know how to do it, just jump right on. This broken urban fabric that's illustrated here is the thing that Union Pier can solve. It can provide opportunities to improve that broken urban fabric and provide for new connections. This is the plan that realizes that, but this is what it looks like from an analytical standpoint. And I'm going to return back to this diagram because this is the thing that is the most important aspect of my presentation today, and Jennifer's as well, is the power of the grid to create mobility options. Unlike many other developments that have been built or proposed on the peninsula, Union Pier has the ability to add new routes to the network that will help to distribute traffic. It will improve intersections all at its perimeter. And I think we can all consider in our mind recent real estate developments downtown that add no new streets, that don't improve intersections, that have in effect no mobility enhancements and just load the grid with more. Well, Union Pier has the chance to expand the grid for people in cars, for people on bikes, for people on foot, for people in transit. That is the power of this proposal, but it can only be realized, and those opportunities can only be realized if this redevelopment takes place.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but just
Yep.
so you know, Councilmember Brady is actually on. He's joined us via Zoom.
Great.
He had a meeting that ran late. He's been on for your entire presentation, just so you know he's here.
Great.
Thanks.
Hello, council member virtually, wherever you are. So thank you. And I
Yep,
assume
no,
that you
thank
have-
you.
All right, excellent. There we go. Let's go.
Whoa.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm missing a
Sorry.
point. Am I missing a
Made it.
point here? Hold on.
Interrupt you there.
Yeah, no, it's okay. It's okay. Just make sure I'm not missing something. Before we move on to the program and its effects, I do also want to be completely forthcoming and totally open with you all about how many opportunities there are to remedy problems on the peninsula. There are physical challenges here that can be remedied through the redevelopment of Union Pier. Those include existing road widths, the presence of rail on Union Pier site, existing drainage problems, subsurface utilities which need improvement. All of those challenges can be remedied through this redevelopment. There are challenges about ownership and maintenance, city ownership of the rights of way. And the TIF and the MID proposals, again, allow a solution there. And then the third thing I referenced at the beginning with the DOT, the state city ownership slide, is interagency coordination. This is a project that calls for a cross-sector collaboration in the truest sense of the word, to realize major improvements that can benefit the entire city, not just this site. And that's something we've discussed when it comes to drainage before. We've discussed it when it comes to affordable housing, and we'll discuss that more on the 20th. But when it comes to transportation, that commitment and that the recognition that this plan can make those improvements can only happen with the collaboration of many, many entities and agencies over a sustained period of time. That's what we're proposing to do. And that's what a vote for this Union Pier PUD can endorse. Okay, so the program and effects. So program, we're adding new things here to the site. What are those things? First of all, I've had folks tell me, Jacob, you guys are just going to give us a sham traffic report. It's going to be a big sham. There's going to show no cars on the street. Well, that's not the case. We will have a traffic report to present with the PUD. We're still working on it along with everything else very diligently. We will have a traffic report that shows all those things. This project does add new cars to the grid. Absolutely, it will. There is no doubt about that. And the traffic report will show that. It also adds people on foot, on bike, and in transit. All of those modes will be added to the grid. And the key way to mitigate impacts and to offer improvements is by making sure that this program, this mix is correct. The proposal here is to build a true walkable, mixed-use, dense urban neighborhood. And this mix achieves that, offering the daily needs that can be, that can meet the services that can meet the daily needs of the people who live here, as well as employment. People who live here can walk to the office. That mix is critical. And that mix is the same thing that we already have in downtown Charleston, with the exception of more housing at this site. We've been losing population downtown. This proposes to add new residential opportunities, including affordable. And that mix is the thing that creates a true walkable neighborhood. And I just want to talk about a couple of other points broader before we get specific. I think that we heard great comments at our last planning commission meeting about the environmental aspects of this project. And those are great comments that we took to heart, and we're going to react to those in many ways. The number one environmental impact of Union Pier is to put people on the grid in a place where they can live their daily lives without depending on a car. Building densely in the city center instead of sprawling at the edge. This is a project that does that. And that is at the core, again, of our transportation proposal and the sustainability of this project. Build in the right place, build densely with the appropriate mix of uses. If it was only one use on the site, that would not achieve those goals. People would have to get in their car to drive to other things all the time. The mix of uses generates the walkability and the balance that's needed to create a truly walkable place. So with that said, just looking through my next one, I'm gonna go to Jennifer to talk further about effects of program.
Hi, Ms. Beal, welcome.
There we go. There we go. Okay. Hi, everybody. I think most of y'all know who I am, Jennifer Beal with Beal Engineering. I'm the owner of a woman-owned transportation engineering firm here downtown Charleston. And as Jacob said, we have prepared the traffic study for the project. So just from a high level standpoint, what we want to do is kind of talk a little bit about what the expected trip generation is. As we said, we have these land uses and they're going to generate traffic. And then what we do is we apply that to the existing network and look to see what the impacts are. So we're looking at what the impacts are for the no build condition, and then what the impacts are for the future conditions, and then what improvements need to be identified to be able to address any impacts that the additional traffic will have. I mean, as Jake said, there is obviously traffic associated with this. We're working on the final submittal of the study, but wanted to give you a little bit of background on what we're seeing numbers wise from a trip generation standpoint. And so kind of stepping everybody back, I know most of you know this, but we look at in traffic studies, the AM and PM peak hours. Those are your peak times. That's what we work towards. And so when we look at this mix, we're looking at approximately 1,400, 1,500 trips in the morning. That's total. So that's going to be split evenly, pretty evenly between entering and exiting. And that's going to access the site from all directions. And then in the afternoon, we're looking at closer to more about 1,800 or so, 1,900 trips. So that's going to be about, 800, 900 coming into the site and then leaving, not the same trip, but about that level of magnitude.
Is that an hour or total?
That is in the hour entering. So pick PM, it's going to be about 800. So entering in that hour and then 900 or so exiting, give or take, in that hour. So those are approximate numbers. All the details will be in the traffic study itself, but just those are the new trips that we expect from the development. So I guess, and what we do, so kind of stepping into the next section I'm going to pass back over to Jacob, is what we do is we look at that and then we get into what improvements are then needed from an infrastructure standpoint for the new vehicular trips, bicycle trips, pedestrian trips, and then we'll.
Yes, sir. I've got a question too.
If you don't mind, and you may not know this on top of your head, but approximately the trip generation that we currently experience from the embarkation, debarkation of cruise ships that will go away.
So that's not a daily occurrence. I don't have those exact numbers, but I can get them for you.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I want to touch on that too, because I think, as we consider this in the real world, right, in 3 dimensions and everything that's going on. And I thought about this in advance of this meeting yesterday. As I was walking Concord Street and there was a cruise ship in town. It generates a lot of activity with vehicles, not just cars, but buses, smaller buses. And so when we're talking about the net effect of what's going to happen with Union Pier, I think to get a complete 3-dimensional picture of it, you've got to consider what's not going to happen. And that's at least twice a week, right? I mean, you got 104 trips, embark, debark a year. So every 3 days, plus or minus, you've got X number of cars coming on and off, X number of buses. And what's the name of the current ship that comes in and out? The Sunshine.
Mhm.
How many does it hold? How many passengers does it hold? 3,500-ish, 3,500. So I mean, 2,500 cars and or buses coming in. And so I think that is something we got to think about for the sort of effects around here. There's going to be some benefit to this. It's not just all cars flooding the streets of the city of Charleston.
Right. And often when the cruise ship terminals, they're happening during the peak hours. Sometimes we're fortunate and it happens. I mean, I work right, a couple blocks away.
Right.
Sometimes we're fortunate it happens off peak, but sometimes it does happen during the peak, and we all know that those days are going to be a little more challenging to navigate through. But yeah, we can get the exact. I don't want to give you a estimate number, but we can get you an exact number, Mayor.
I guess one other thing, when we sort of think about this holistically, this is the number of trips that are going to be generated from the site on and off, right?
Correct. Mhm.
I'm interested too. I mean, you've got that site surrounded by a lot of things, not the least of which is East Bay Street, which with all due respect is one of the most dysfunctional streets we've got, not just on the peninsula, but in the city. It's got challenges. And anything that this gridding and this does as an opportunity to lessen the effects of what happens on East Bay Street is something that I know I'm going to be interested in. I think this community is going to be hugely interested in. And I think that's a big deal. I live downtown. Ansborough is not currently in my district. It's about to be. I have a house there and I listen to what they have to say, including as recently as Tuesday. Mobility and traffic around the site is totally at the top of their minds, totally at the top of their minds. And I think giving a good snapshot of what that's going to look like is going to be helpful.
Right. And I think your next slide, actually, Jacob, I think will show that perfectly.
Okay. I don't want to get too far ahead of it. This is y'all's time. So sorry.
Go ahead.
So first of all, I know hundreds of cars per day. That seems like a high number. The important thing here is that we are distributing those trips across a newly created grid.
Right.
And the goal of this work is to be sure that we are creating improvements to the grid, to the intersections on and off site, so that the network functions with no overall reduction in total level of service to the network. That is where we are going from our design. There are 4 different modes that I want to drill down on next. But I want to start by saying that the needs of the neighborhood that you mentioned, Mr. Chair, foremost on our mind. We of course have met with Ansborough many times. The full membership, their Union Peer Committee, as well as their leadership. We've met with leadership of the Garden District, and we will continue to do so. And any other neighborhoods that want to talk about traffic, of course, as always. And we recognize those concerns because they are founded concerns. So inherent in what we're talking about today are designs on the site and designs off site. If there are specific things that neighborhoods want us to discuss, entertain, and look at, of course, we're going to continue to do that just as we have done all the way along. So I'm going to continue along. So the first mode in terms of transportation opportunities is an improvement to the automotive network. And that's what we were just talking about, making sure that there are more routes for cars. Specifically, the reconnected Concord Street, the reconnected Society Street, Hazel Street, Pritchard Street, all of which will extend, creating a whole series of new routes to move east-west and north-south. Now, where is this in the grid, position in the grid, in the overall network? Concord Street is not a citywide connector. It connects Vendu at Waterfront Park all the way up to Charlotte Park, just north of the aquarium. So it connects those 2 places, but those streets don't go on to connect to Somerville. Whereas East Bay and Washington streets will extend further to the north and do extend further to the north. Concord, however, does not. Concord will be anchored by Union Pier. It will be the most interesting thing going on in this portion is this mixed use development generating the most mobility need, whereas these other corridors are through movement corridors. And the automotive network has to improve functionality as we go forward. Now, that's the on-site scenario. The other part of it is the off-site improvements. And we've all discussed the changes that can happen over the network of Washington East Bay. These, of course, these ideas go way back. I've been told that there are even plans from the 70s that talk about the improvement of the Washington East Bay corridor. I haven't seen this. This, of course, is in the Calhoun Street plan by Chan Krieger that was done, I think in 05 or 06. The Century 5 plan, of course, includes the 2010 plan for the reuse of Union Pier, even all the way back to the 1996 plan for Union Pier, all include suggested changes to the corridors of East Bay, Washington. They keep coming back because it's a good idea. And we continue to study it as well. We think it's something that needs to be pursued and needs to be done. This is how this can work. And we're going to show you the design options that we've looked at, and we're going to show you the one that we think is most feasible. So again, we're oriented 90 degrees here. You can see the East Bay corridor snaking its way through. If you live in Charleston, you've driven on East Bay Street, you know that the segment from Calhoun to Market is substandard in many ways. The lanes are too narrow, the geometries are irregular, there's no space for bikes, the sidewalks are too narrow, the intersections are challenging. It's just difficult to navigate. Our goal is to create a slow speed, high volume network on and off site, with improved efficiency that can help to move everyone through the grid. And one way to achieve that is by increasing the facilities on Washington Street and enhancing Washington Street so that Washington and East Bay begin to function as a coordinated pair. That's what's been described in all of these subsequent plans for maybe 50 years. And that's what we've looked at. And a way to do that is on the northern end. This is the Chapel East Bay looking south. This is an oblique view looking south. In today's configuration, East Bay Street goes straight. And if you drive south on East Bay Street, especially in the mornings, as you approach Chapel, you'll notice that there's a left-hand turning movement that causes traffic to back up at Chapel Street. That's right. There's the cut through the gas station, which I'm sure the bank and the gas station just love the fact that there's that little road there. This can be enhanced, right? This can be improved. This northern intersection can only happen, however, if the southern part happens. And why is the southern intersection only possible with the redevelopment of Union Pier? Well, the answer is that the diversion of Washington Street, and I'll show you some drawings on that in just a second, goes through the warehouses that are currently on the Union Pier site. So this network arrangement is something that only comes into play when Union Pier itself becomes converted from a port to another use. The warehouses have to be demolished. And that's probably the reason why this has never been fully realized. So with that said, these are the alternatives that we've looked at. The historical proposal puts 4 lanes on Washington and 2 on East Bay. And as we've studied this further, we believe that this has significant right-of-way width constraints. It means that there's not enough street, there's not enough width to get everything through. So this one is constrained in a way that we think makes it significantly less feasible than this design, which is a 3 and 3. And what this does is it does shift volume off of East Bay, gets volume away from Ansonboro and on to Washington, accomplishing the network goal of the original proposal that goes back 40 years or so. But it does it in a way that is the most feasible because you don't run up against roads that are too narrow. So this can work, we believe. And this is the thing that we're going to be, this is our recommended and preferred option simply because we believe it's the most feasible. This is the 3 and 3. And by the way, this is two-way movement on the streets. And there's another option as well, which we've discussed, which is the one-way pair. So Washington becomes a one-way, East Bay becomes a one-way. We believe this, of course, is the least feasible. It probably does, however, move the most traffic. With that said, we haven't proven this out yet. We haven't studied this in depth. I told the traffic and transportation department that we didn't want to give them a one-way pair to have to undo in 40 years. So we don't believe that this is the most feasible. The 3 and 3, this one we think is the most feasible of the 3. So what do those details look like and how do you accomplish an improvement of these networks over time? And I don't know, Jennifer, do you want to go through these or do you want me to just roll through them? What do you prefer? Okay, if I say something wrong, yell at me. Okay, I'm just going to read from the slides, which seems like the easiest thing. So how do we do this? First thing is to improve the laneage and intersection configurations on Washington and East Bay. The second thing is to improve Washington at Calhoun, that intersection, and to shift traffic flow to Washington. The Washington-Calhoun left-hand movement northbound, as you all know, is a challenging one. And this network design can help to change that and improve it if it's done the right way. At the southern end of the site, again, at Union Pier, shift traffic flow to Washington with a new signalized intersection of East Bay at Washington in the Pinckney-Pritchard Street area. And then all along the Washington Street corridor, improve the street, signalize it at Hazel and Washington at Lawrence. And then to improve, finally, the intersection all the way to the north at Charlotte. This is at the aquarium in Charlotte Park. There's just a turn in the street there. That intersection has some visibility challenges and it's a little, Jennifer could elaborate on those. That also needs improvement. These are the offsite improvements that need to occur to realize this vision that the city has had in so many plans for so many years. This again requires interagency coordination and a commitment, but it's not possible without Union Pier's property. Come on up, come on up.
Just as a reminder, we're looking at the vehicular improvements, like what do we need to do to get the cars to where they need to be? There's a whole set of pedestrian and bicycle improvements and transit improvements that are on. So just remember, Jake's kind of stepping through this way, but these are the ones that we're kind of working on, kind of working top to bottom. And then, you know, if anybody's been to the Charlotte or Concord at Charlotte intersection, you know, that's just not a real intersection today. It's kind of a turn. And so, you know, there will be increased volume even with the current plans for that section of Concord. So just kind of get that cleaned up and make it more efficient. But that's what we're really looking for. We're looking for how to not only to kind of help with the lane widths and making the streets a little bit bigger and be able to handle more capacity and efficiency and really kind of get the most we can out of the lanes that we have and the intersections.
So I'll move along we'll come back. Keep going. What could this look like? These are some sketches that show what how these concepts may work on the southern end.
East Bay and
Thank you.
Pinckney Street.
So that's correct. This is East Bay Pinckney. Market Street in this image is behind you. It's to your back. So in the future, Washington Street diverges and it goes again through the warehouses that currently exist onto the.
Can I ask you a question about that? Can you go back to that picture? Is the effective zero lot line of the Union Pier PUD and development Washington Street? Is that the zero lot line?
Help me understand what you mean by
The
zero lot.
edge of the distinction between Union Pier on and Union Pier off, right?
That's correct. To the right, on the other side of the purple line, that's Union Pier.
Okay,
And today, where the van is parked, that's Union Pier. That's on port property.
okay.
So yes, that's correct. And then when you're on Washington Street, what does Washington Street look like? This is today's Washington Street. The Ansonboro Inn is on the left. And what's envisioned is, again, a beautiful street in keeping with Charleston's character. These are 3-story buildings, row house type design on the left. And this kind of reconfiguration is the thing that we think can be, again, enabled. What does East Bay Street look like? By shifting volume away. And again, we have to make sure that we've proved it out. I got to make sure it works. 3 lanes here and bike facilities on East Bay, because all of this segment of East Bay does lose a lane in their current preferred option. So you're losing 1 vehicular lane through the entire corridor. Next, the next mode, the cycling network. So first and foremost, and I'll get to the details of this, we need a meeting with my friend, Mrs. Zimmerman, and Charleston Moves. And I want to make sure that you know that we understand, we have read every letter that you have written. We understand that there are needs that can be met here, and we want to get together with you as soon as we can. So after the meeting, let's talk, because it's very important that we meet and we understand all of your viewpoints and perspectives. I also want to say, as a lifelong cyclist myself, you all know that that's a cause that we are dedicated to. And I want to walk you through our current thinking. On Union Pier, the proposal for these streets are narrow, slow speed streets, streets that are made for the integration of walking, cycling, and vehicles all at once. We are not proposing high speed streets that need separated, dedicated infrastructure. That's not in the design proposal here, with the exception, of course, of East Bay Street. Now, the intention, the concept, our preferred concept, most feasible concept, takes volume away from today's East Bay, which opens up the potential for East Bay to become a bicycle corridor. From Chapel all the way down to Market, from Market all the way up to Chapel. That's a new idea. That's what's shown in this version. And that could be a huge benefit to cycling and to mobility on the peninsula, adding a bicycle corridor closer to the neighborhoods. And every street on Union Pier should again be a slow speed street, which is cycling safe inherently with its design. And again, this is the network diagram with East Bay becoming bicycle corridor over the course of its life. Now, one question is Concord Street. What happens at Concord Street? Does it need bike lanes or not? That's a question that we're open to discussion. We're open to suggestions, and we're open to how the conversation may evolve. I want to point to the thing that city staff indicated to us in their PUD response, which is do it according to the People Pedal Plan, the city's adopted bicycle plan, which I had the pleasure of working on the very first version of this and bringing it to life back in the Tim Keene days. It's been a while. What this document does is that it says that there should be a system applied when we study the roadways around the city. And we shouldn't just not put lanes or not put bike facilities or put them however we feel like because we enjoy them, but there should actually, or not enjoy them. But there needs to be a system that provides justification for where bicycle facilities are provided and how they're configured. And the People Pedal plan that we use at the city is a combination of two things: the London Cycle Design Standards from 2012 and the NACTO, National Association of City Transportation Officials, guidelines for the United States, creating what we believe is a combination system that's kind of halfway between a European city and halfway between an American city. And that, of course, is what Charleston is when it comes to its design. That's how the system is founded. Briefly, I want to delve into some detail and make sure this is on the record for this meeting, so that we can communicate our design intent and open up the conversation for future discussion. The way that this system works is that it says fundamentally, if a street is slow speed and there aren't many cars on it, then the bikes and the cars can be combined. And that's what's safe. If it's really slow speed, the bikes, the cars, and the people can even be combined. And that's safe. If it's high speed, or if there's lots of cars on the street, you need to separate the bicycle infrastructure. That's what undergirds the entire plan. And all these networks that you see in blue were analyzed. So by this rubric, this system, this was based on London's standards. If a street is between 6,000 and 13,000 cars per day, it says cycle lanes or combined use with calming and signage. That means the bikes and the cars are together on a calm street, a street with cobblestones, well, maybe not cobblestones, a street with bricks, paved street, or a street that otherwise has calming features that slow the cars down and enable the car and the bike to share and keep lanes narrow, which reduces speed and therefore increases safety. Below 6,000 cars per day are traffic calm streets. They need no intervention. They're good to go as long as the intersections are safe. On the other side, if a corridor is over 13,000 cars a day, you absolutely need separated facilities. You need a cycle track. You need something with a physical barrier. You want it to be safe. That system has been in place since we created and adopted this plan, and we ran that on Union Pier. This is the system that we've used in designing the streets. Now, if we're missing something, or if we need to provide different kinds of facilities, let's sit down and talk about it. Simple as that. And what that does for us, that's what creates our proposal. Now, the last thing I'll say about Concord Street, does Concord, you need bike lanes in this section? Again, we're open to any new ideas. We may be missing something, but this is our analysis. First of all, we don't believe that the volumes are going to go above 6,000 cars per day. So the volume, we don't think they're going to go above that. So that doesn't put us clearly in the need bike lane category. It puts us in the shared category. That's the first piece. Second piece is that we have disconnected infrastructure. We're not aware that there are plans for bike lanes on Concord Street south of Union Pier or Concord Street north of Union Pier. And the third thing is that we don't want to widen the streets by adding a bicycle lane and therefore creating more pavement space and speeding up cars, which is adverse to our goal. And the last thing is we don't want to provide opportunistic parking opportunities for people parking in bike lanes. So that's been our thinking. We could be wrong. We're open to conversation, but that's why we've derived the design that we have, because we think it applies the best standards of the city in the right way on the site. And now moving on to the transit network. The main thing about the transit network on this site is the reconnection of Concord Street.
I'll give you 5 more minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. We have met with CARTA, and we are aware that they're doing a citywide, peninsula-wide study, and we are working in coordination with them. We have identified Concord Street as a key link in the network. And Jennifer, tell me if I misspeak or say anything wrong. This new north-south connection provides for what could potentially be whole new routes for them, or it could augment the existing routes that they have. We've talked with them about optimizing the location of stops. We especially are interested in a stop that is on the southern side, close to passenger terminal, which can help to provide for an immediate transit link to everyone that calls upon the city of Charleston on a port of call cruise ship. They can get right onto a CARTA bus.
You're going to have transit there. I mean, without embark, debark, with protocol, people are going to be looking for ways to get around the city.
And we have space to do it in the new park that will be designed right in front of the Custom House. So it's a great opportunity for a major addition to the transit network. And there may be other opportunities to integrate a transit stop with, we've talked a lot about ferry service, should that prove feasible. Perhaps there's a link there as well that gets water service directly onto land transit service. So a lot of opportunities provided through the north-south connection. And the final thing, the whole grid built out, is the pedestrian network. This is in many ways, for me at least, the most compelling aspect of Union Pier. Two colors that have been added to the map. The green are pedestrian streets, pedestrian walkways in the tradition of Charleston, from Gateway Walk, where I lived for many years, to Stoll's Alley, to all the different alleys that are all throughout the city. Pedestrian network, north-south or east-west, excuse me. And then of course, in the tan color, yellow color, is a pedestrian network added within parks throughout the city, and primarily at the waterfront, opening the waterfront to the public forever. This pedestrian network interconnects a whole series of landmarks and new public spaces to be created that will make walking through Union Pier a truly wonderful experience, where different landmarks will be experienced in sequence. We really think that the pedestrian opportunities here are incredible. And I'll conclude on these slides. I've just got a few and I'll conclude. Creating the link of the public pedestrian promenade all the way around the peninsula is the crown jewel of this project. And we believe that it will be a major enhancement, not just because it has resiliency qualities, but because it is a great place to walk and will open the harbor to the public for the first time ever, interconnecting a beautiful series of spaces. Another space on the site with no cars in the image. This is just a pedestrian park connected on that network. So again, an automotive network, high efficiency, preserve existing level of service on the whole network by creating new connections. A cycling network that has potential to create a bicycle route all the way up and down East Bay Street, Market to Chapel. A transit network that opens up new stops along Concord Street, serving port of call passengers, serving potential passengers from the ferry service, serving everyone in Charleston who wants to move around on transit, and a pedestrian network that expands greatly the pedestrian assets of downtown by linking together the waterfront to the north and south. And this is the vision that we believe can accomplish that. So with that said, I'll go, before I relinquish the mic to the port team and the design team. Have I missed anything? Anything else you want to add? Get on the record? Nothing else? Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you very much. I see a point. I see a question. Okay, Councilmember Brady, we're going to get to the mayor. I'm going to start with the mayor, then go to Councilmember Brady.
Me first?
Yep.
Okay. I might take a minute, so.
All right, Councilmember Brady. The
Thank
mayor
you,
may
Mr.
take up the rest of the time.
Yeah. No, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Jacob and team for that. Greatly appreciated, and I appreciate you reaching out to Charleston Moves after this, because I think they have a important kind of advocacy role to play. But I kind of had a question, and it may be more towards Chairman Seekings. But he and I have worked on stoplights a lot here in the city, and know that our friends at the county and our friends at the DOT are not always as receptive. I agree with those locations, but just wanted to see kind of what we thought kind of the time horizon was for our friends at the state and the county to kind of come on board with this plan if it's what we choose to go forward with.
That's a good question. I had the same question. We'll hand it to Jacob. I think the question is, when are you going to go sit down with the county and the DOT and talk about the off-site changes and improvements, which you don't control as opposed to the on-site? Right?
Great question. So again, we were just about to finalize our traffic study, and it would have been premature to speculate. And now we think we're at a point where we can begin doing that.
Yeah, I mean, because off-site, particularly the East Bay, Washington Street couplet, whatever you do with Concord Street, all that, you're going to need the DOT. Right. I mean, that's 100%. Even if we take back all the parts of those streets, it's a DOT on the front end. Okay. Councilmember Brady, any follow-up?
Nope, that's what I was looking for.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Mayor?
So this is the first time we're seeing some of this to this detail. So I had a couple of questions, and maybe that we have a follow-up get together about some of these items. But would you mind flipping all the way back, close to the beginning, that shot of Concord Street looking north?
Yes, sir.
You mentioned the puddle that was in the street. It was way back in the beginning.
Yeah.
I just wanted to point out that you failed to mention the beautiful barbed wire fence that That
There
was
we
on
go.
the right there. And then we've had a lot of discussion about green space. I think that's the only tree within Union Pier right there in the right of way. So save that tree and add to it. And just for everybody's edification, it just happens that I worked for the city during the late 90s. And Barbara might remember this, but the reason they closed Concord Street was at the time, even though the city was encouraging the port to do this redevelopment of this terminal, that was when BMW was really ramping up production, and they improved the rail access to the site, and Concord Street created conflict with the arrival of the cars that were going to be shipped out through Union Pier. And so that's why why Concord Street got closed back then. Of course, we don't really use the rail much anymore ever since the cruise ships went in. So it kind of seems like, well, why did we ever close the street? But anyway, there was a good reason at the time. Speaking of the pedestrian waterfront walkway, which was close to the end of the slides, you don't need to go there. But and this might be something we need to all follow up on. Have y'all talked yet with Wharfside and with Fleet Landing? They seem to be the two property owners that we need to get a right of way or permission in order to make that possible on the southern and the northern end. Because once you get past the Wharfside, you're at the Maritime Center and we're good to the aquarium. On the south side, we're good at the Cooper Hotel, but not across Fleet Landing. So we can come back to that another time. You mentioned money for long-term maintenance of streets. This is an issue not just for Union Pier, but for the whole city that we've been talking about, because we have no dedicated income coming to the city of Charleston to maintain streets. And we're taking responsibility for street after street after street. This will be a whole collection of them. So I'd like to hear more about how that's going to work. The intersection rating, this example came up, and I guess 2 points. One, if you turn to Jacob, one of those maps where you showed the vehicular traffic.
Yes, sir.
It occurred to me on the secondary streets, particularly Pinckney and whatever little side street.
Pritchard is the one just north. of Pinckney.
Pritchard, and there's even a north-south secondary street, I think, in there. They don't line up, on the, well, at the intersection, they don't line up.
Right.
And everything I've learned about this business, I'm not a traffic engineer, but the DOT tells us always try to line your streets up. You get a better performance out of them. Case in point is over in Avondale. We want to realign what's Nicholson Street, and the county did a study saying, well, the intersection, if you leave it as is, in 20 years, it's going to be rated a F or a E, a failure. But if you do the alignment right, it makes it a A. I mean, a huge difference in just making a simple alignment of the street. So I was curious if Jennifer is going to have any kind of intersection analysis, what if 20 years from now, what would the rating for East Bay and Calhoun Street be essentially versus if you do all this? You follow me?
Yep.
So that's another kind of follow-up thing. And then Ginyard Street didn't really make it across the East Bay. And I know you got that big development block there, but I would still question in a way how you're going to access service that block without having an alleyway or a Ginyard Street going through the middle of it. And I think that's all on my list for right now.
Okay, I think I've
Yeah.
got them all. Thank you,
Yeah.
Mayor.
Okay.
That's your laundry list of to-dos.
I got it.
Councilmember Parker, any questions? Councilmember Shea, I'm going to give you one, because I got a few and we're running out of time.
Well, I'll try to talk fast, and I appreciate the opportunity to sit in and ask some questions or make some observations. And I think that what you said very early on in your presentation is that as this property stands right now, it has this impact of choking off the city. This reminds me of the September freeway. It just cuts the city off north and south. And this is one of the real problems where we are right now. And in the current situation, it does cut off the north and south part of the city on this part. And you've got a blank canvas to deal with this, to address a lot of the issues that you brought up. As you're doing your traffic study, I would ask you to think about a couple of things. This was a very active port. And when it was a very active port at one time, you had heavy trucks coming in and out all over the place. And so a comparison as to your traffic study, it would be, what was that traffic count like? What was the impact of those heavy trucks coming in and out on a regular basis on these existing roadways is the way they are configured now? And so when they were coming out of Columbus Street or coming out of any of the other side streets around there, it had a choking impact on vehicles and other regular traffic coming back and forth. The other thing in considering your traffic study is that you're going to add or proposing to add 600 units, hotel units plus 1,600 residential units. And while you do all of this wonderful stuff, which is going to be really, really good when this is all done, it's going to have a huge impact as it stands right now. So in other words, if you make all these connectivities with these other streets going north and south, east and west, you're also going to be adding a burden on traffic as well. So I'm throwing that idea at you to keep that in mind. It is going to have you're having a positive, but then a negative impact at the same time. The mayor mentioned about maintenance.
One more.
Wait a minute.
Quick.
The mayor mentioned something about maintenance of streets. One of my pet peeves from being on the Public Works Committee is sidewalks and sidewalks and sidewalks. So it's not just maintenance of streets, there's also maintenance of sidewalks. And all the other things that I think you have to have out here are, of course, the public transportation, the bike, pedestrian, and streetscaping to go along with all of that. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, for giving me my 3 seconds of fame.
That's a politician, 3 seconds, that's about 5 minutes. All right, thank you. Thank you all for being here. We do have some other business. I have a couple things, if you don't mind. Sorry. Probably more. And I do think the mayor's suggestion of coming back and sort of as we think through this and as this gets developed, we're going to invite you back, if you don't mind, to talk a little bit more about this, because I know there's going to be an enormous amount of interest in the community about this, enormous, after this is shown for the first time. So I am, for purposes of right now, going to focus in on off property and how we collectively, as you said, through interagency cooperation, how we collectively can make the East Bay Washington Street corridor changes finally, after really it's been 25 or 30 years, a reality. How does that look in 3 dimensions in the real world, in the time frame that you all are thinking about for this? How do we do it in terms of interagency cooperation and financing it? Because it's not going to be cheap to do, right? And I am hugely, this is no secret to you, Jacob, who's talked about it, I'm hugely interested in that East Bay corridor improvement, redesign, reconfiguration, and traffic calming, and allowing East Bay Street, what it should have been for a long time, to be the edge of a calm residential neighborhood to the west, and allowing people who live in that residential neighborhood to walk safely down the street, to ride their bikes, and be able to cross the street, none of which you can do right now. That street is for all of that. You walk on those sidewalks, that, buyer beware, right? You're taking, anyway. So how does that work? Give me a minute on civics and how we make this happen.
Great question. So one of the things we've been doing is studying these alternatives and seeing what can work. And we have one that we think is most feasible right now. We also are, again, coming forth with a traffic study. So we'll have real data that we can use to begin discussions. But that said, the most important thing is that the city, through the PUD, decides on the plan that the city wants to pursue. It's an endorsement of a plan for the corridor. And at the PUD level, what we would typically do for a PUD, but we're going to exceed that in this case, is we're going to say, this is the concept for offsite improvement. But in this case, we're going to go a little bit further. Now, at the concept plan level, When we get really down to the details of engineering, that's when we would like to have the corridor engineered out. But with that said, we think select an alternative, look at the details of that alternative, discuss with the other agencies, but most importantly, have the city endorse one of those alternatives as a part of the PUD.
So let me follow up on that. I mean, a PUD is what it is. It's a creature of both South Carolina and city law. There are the confines of the PUD and there's the effects inside it and outside, right? What tools do we have, the city or collectively together, to make outside of the PUD improvements happen and be tied in to this PUD?
That's a great
And I
question.
think that's the question I'm asking.
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's very common in many PUDs to speak to the nature of offsite improvements. Long Savannah speaks to the Glen McConnell expansion. The list goes on. Almost every PUD has those provisions within it. And what we would do is with the land use attorneys, welcome a discussion about exactly how we accomplish those things through all those mechanisms. And of course, there's PUD itself. There's also the mechanisms of the TIF, which can tie specific funds to certain improvements. We have a lot of tools in the kit, and we look forward to a discussion as we go forward.
And I just think that sort of from my perspective is a big deal. I see
Right.
Ms. Melvin standing, so we just,
Here,
yeah, if
stand
you
it,
don't
please.
mind, we
I can hand it to you.
minutes
Here,
in
just stay
real
where you-
time here, so.
You could hand her the mic or she could go.
Yeah,
I think I see where this is going.
anyway, thank you.
Absolutely. Mr. Chairman, what I know I can commit to you on behalf of the Ports Authority is us bringing together the other stakeholders, the DOT, as we've done in other instances with regards to traffic considerations on terminal or in and around our facilities, so that we can have great interconnectivity with existing infrastructure, improvements to that infrastructure as we make improvements either to our facilities or in this case, redeveloping the facility.
Thank you. And it's going to take that. I mean, it's going to take the sort of influence of all the agencies, particularly the port, when it comes to the DOT, to get them interested and engaged.
Amen.
All right, there's so much more to talk about. Thank you all for being here. Unless there's any real pressing questions for any member of the committee, I'm going to end this portion of our program by saying this. This is incredibly interesting and informative. More to come, right? Would love to have you back at your convenience and ours, but sooner rather than later, if you all don't mind, and if you don't mind keeping us informed. And I would ask that to the extent that you all are meeting and speaking with the DOT, you just let us know how that goes and perhaps include Mr. Somerville or some of his staff as those conversations go forward. Okay. Any other questions for any member of the committee? Also, will you share this presentation with us, please? Great, thank you. Any other questions for any other member of the committee? With that, I'm going to move on to the next item on our agenda, which is the parking meter contract approval with Kale America Inc. doing business as Flowbird. And who's going to handle this? Ms. Shear, it's you?
Chairman. So I'm here to report some good news. We have finalized our contract for,
Come right up to the mic.
Yeah.
okay, sorry.
Yeah.
All right, well, I do have some good news to report. We have finalized the contract for our updated parking meters. This is with Kale America doing business as Flowbird. This was an RFP that closed end of last year. I believe several of y'all were on the selection committee with and awarded it to the contract to Flowbird, Kale America. We have finalized the contract. It'll be for the contract is for $800,000 for a term of 3 years with 3 one-year extensions. I believe that the team has already been down to work with the city of Charleston to identify our needs. I'm not sure if those have been finalized yet, but it does look like it'll be over 1,100 new parking meters. No action needs to be taken on this contract. It went through bids and purchases, so this will appear on Ways and Means. This was just for information and to answer any questions.
Okay, any member of the committee have any questions, or Mr. Somerville, do you have any follow-up? Anything you want to add?
No, sir. I guess I just want to let the committee know, we started this back in October of last year, in which in December is when we made the selection of Flowbird. And again, went through the negotiations of this and we're ready to move forward. You know, Flowbird are the new meters. We plan on having a single space, double space with pay stations. We'll have the parking apps and smart card, credit card options. So we're pretty excited. And once we get this contract signed and we're ready to move forward.
Great, thank you. Any questions from any member of the committee? Councilmember Parker, I'm gonna start with Councilmember Parker. She's been very quiet today. Councilmember Parker. You first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just quickly, so 1,100 meters, 800,000, are these needing to be replaced or are we just looking to upgrade equipment?
Really, they need to be replaced. They're 2G, so they're kind of outdated. So they're upgrading to 5G. So the meters are in
Okay,
very much need of replacement.
okay, all right, thank you.
I think I can confirm, just living downtown and seeing them, that what Mr. Somerville said is 100% accurate. Mayor Tecum.
So, Robbie, you mentioned a couple of things there, including the app
Yes.
or some payment by app. Would you just kind of summarize when you have these meters in place, what will be different about what we have now? What will we be doing that we don't do now?
Well, the meters we have now, as far as the payment, they accept coin. We have the smart card option and credit card. These new meters they have the option of accepting coin. They will accept credit card. They have the smart card option as well as the app. The app will allow our customers to pay different options. They can pay by phone, as well as the pay stations. We're planning on at least putting 6 in our surface lots now. The pay stations are touchscreen, which again will allow them to pay with coin, credit card, or pay by space. This Flowbird also has a license plate recognition. So they can pay per space is an option that we have with that as well. So there's a bunch of different options with this, the new company, just so much technology out there for us to be able to use.
Well, when I use the pay station, will I have to print out a little ticket and then go back to my car and put it in the windshield or?
That's an option. We can do the paper, but we can do the paperless, which you'll put in your license plate.
I see.
And then that's the LPR, that's a pay by space through your vehicle license plate.
Okay.
This is a great opportunity in history, Mr. Mayor, for people to learn their actual license plate number. I bet if you went around this table, and asked people what their license plate is, no one would know it. This will be a change to that, right? Any other questions? Just really quickly, I did sit on that selection committee, and one of the things I think distinguished this company from the others who presented, all of whom, by the way, were really excellent, was the fact that they are a technology forward-thinking company, and that what we're getting will allow us to meet future technological demands, which our current system does not let us do. And one of the things that we talked about during the selection process and asked them pretty pointedly about is how eventually in the future, the less hardware you're going to need, it's going to be so much more software driven, or eventually you'll just have a QR code on a sidewalk. You use your smartphone, boom, that also becomes the meter head, and it's all in real time. And that will become so much more efficient. And I did hear you say 1,100 meter heads, and we've got 1,700 meters. So we doing just some by station. Is that what we're doing?
Yes, I think it's around 150, 160 spaces will be pay station.
Okay. What's the time frame? Once we get the sign, when can we see some activity?
Well, we've been meeting with them weekly. I believe it's weekly. We've been talking with them. The initial was 3 months after the contract is signed. But probably around that same timeline, 3 months.
And just the last question, the 800,000 is for hardware and support. Is that what this? we're
Yes,
paying
in
for?
the system software, yes,
Okay, hardware, software, and support.
yes.
Any other questions from the committee? We don't need any action on this. I'm going to pass along that we've been informed of this to Ways and Means if they ask, and we'll take it up at Ways and Means.
Great, thank
Right.
you.
Okay, one last item on our agenda. I see him sitting back there very patiently. Is Mr. Lawrence going to give us a quick report on Upper King Street? Because we have asked for a monthly report on what's going on Upper King Street.
Yes, sir.
The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. Tyrone Lawrence, Director of Parking Services for the City of Charleston. Want to give a quick update on the King Street parking restrictions that's on the weekends. This past weekend, we towed a total of 10 vehicles. That's been Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Changed up the format a little bit, Mr. Mayor. This time, instead of placing the bags on the meters at 4 o'clock, we moved it back to 5 o'clock. So 5 o'clock, bag the meters. We didn't enforce until 7 o'clock. So it gave us still a 2-hour window, but the only significant change we saw was probably 3 additional vehicles towed in the previous weekends. So not bad at all. So the ultimate goal, of course, is to get rid of those cones you mentioned. That's a eyesore to you. So get rid of the cones, no need to bag, and let the signs do what they were anticipated to do. But moving the hour back from 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock, we only saw maybe three cars additional was sold this weekend. But besides that, we consider it a success. We're going to do the same thing this weekend. So.
That's good. Do we have enough information to know whether those cars that were towed were there at 5 o'clock when you put the bags on, or same car?
I can check that. I don't have it with me, but I can
Yeah.
check that. So.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so I don't know how we're coming along on some alternative to the cone.
Yes, sir.
I meant to go shopping online and see if I could find something, but if we had some planter that we could install some little casters on, some little wheels with a little evergreen boxwood or some little plant that would beautify the somewhere along the side of the curb or alongside the meter, that you could just roll out there and put in place when the space becomes empty, rather than putting that orange cone on there.
Yes, sir.
Could have a bright color on the planter so it, catches people's attention. But I think it'd be, we've shown that the hanging baskets help beautify King Street. If we could do something more with some kind of a beautification at the same time, I think that'd be worth pursuing. Maybe the business improvement district could help us with that. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
I just want to say thank you. Your team's doing a really good job of this hard business, but it's made a big difference. So thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And you let us know what we can do to help you, please.
Sure.
Okay.
We're
Thanks.
good. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, man.
Okay, we have now come to the end of our agenda. Is there anything else to come before the Traffic and Transportation Committee? Yes, Councilmember Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I touched base with you earlier, but I would just request that we bring Rethink Folly Road to our committee at some point. I know this has been a big conversation on James Island, so we'd love to have some conversations about Rethink Folly Road here in our Traffic and Transportation Committee, if it works for
Absolutely.
you. Thank you.
Absolutely. In fact, when I went back and looked at our rules of council for any standing committee, any member of the committee can request something to be put on agenda. And if the chairman doesn't put it on, that member can put it on the agenda themselves. That's in our rules. So, but your chairman has heard you. We will make sure that happens. You let us know who we need to get from the Rethink Folly Road group, and we'll coordinate schedules and get them here. Fair enough? Great. Okay, anything else from any other member of the committee? Any other requests? If not, by acclamation, we're adjourned for 10 minutes. Thank you.